If you have any private questions that you would not like recorded, definitely send us an email afterwards or send it through. Okay, we're gonna get started right now. Welcome everyone to our second event of Open Access Week. Today is Introduction to Preprints. My name is Allegra Tennis. I'll be your MC for this event. We're gonna start out with a video pre-recorded by our director, who was unable to be here right now. We're gonna go through with a few introductions to a few individual preprint servers by various librarians from around River Campus, and end with a few things. We are hoping to have plenty of time at the end for questions, but if you come up with any in the meantime, please drop them in the chat. We have other folks monitoring that. All right.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our Introduction to Preprint session. My name is Sarah Pukichev, and I am the Director of Science and Engineering Libraries and Research Initiatives here at the University of Rochester. I'm joined today by 7 fantastic colleagues and fellow librarians. We're going to share some discipline-specific information about preprints. Today, I'll be kicking us off with a general introduction to preprints. Okay, so before we dive into the bulk of our content, I want to pose some questions to you. Think about these, reflect upon them. If you're in Zoom, feel free to put it in the chat. Even though I'm not currently live, all of my colleagues are, and we'll be happy to answer questions in the chat as we go along. But here are these questions for reflection. The first question is, have you heard about preprints? And if you have, do you regularly read them? Do you cite them? Do you publish them? Or are you just curious about them? So think about that and think about how that might inform your reaction to our session today. So my first point is, what is a preprint? And so I like this definition from the journal Science. We're
going to pause there just for a second if you'd like to reflect on some of those questions that Sarah had. Have you heard about preprints? Have you read them? Do you cite them? What was the last one? Publish them. I'm going to drop those in chat so we have them, so you can reflect on them, and then we'll start up the video again.
The author's version of a research manuscript before the peer review process. So this is prior to the formal peer review process, and then that version is deposited and made publicly available on a server. on the website, on the platform. And I will challenge this definition just a little bit. It specifically is talking about the peer review process at a journal. That doesn't mean preprints have to be potential journal articles. There are ways we can push and see what else is included in preprints, but the most common preprint is scholarship that is destined to be a journal article and formatted accordingly. So where do preprints fit within the scholarship publishing lifecycle, the ecosystem? I think this graph does a nice job of laying it out. This is from Nature Chemistry, published just last year. So we have preprints down here in yellow, and then we have the more traditional publishing model of a journal article up here in pink. What I really want to point out here is that the preprint does not have to be separate from the manuscript. We've got a point right here where someone publishes a preprint, they get that informal community feedback, and then they re-enter the preprint into the more formal peer review process. Sometimes even once you finish that process, journals will allow you to include an updated preprint. Let's say this whole time preprints are available during this peer review process, and it's actually a citable item. So these are kind of how the preprints can interact with the scholarly ecosystem, the more traditional method of publishing. So why would you want to do preprints? The first point I'll mention is time. It's faster to share. It's faster to get your research out there. The review process for journal articles takes time. It can take months, it can take years. And while that's happening, research is continuing. You're continuing your research, your peers are continuing theirs. By sharing more immediate results, we increase the speed of research in general. Across our peers, we're able to build upon each other's preprints. It also provides rapid evaluation of results before the peer review process, and it also enables you potentially to stake your claim or contribution first. You don't have to wait until the peer review process is done to share your idea and share that you're the one who came up with that idea and that scholarship. Another big advantage of preprints is they are openly shared. This can make it very convenient for people to access your material. It boosts your visibility and discoverability. Not everyone has access to the journals in which we publish scholarship. Researchers at universities or independent researchers that have less funding can't always pay for those journal subscriptions. Researchers in other parts of the globe, especially the global south, often don't have the funds to find these, pay for these journal subscriptions. So by using preprints, you're allowing those researchers to also engage with your work. You're also potentially overcoming gatekeepers and some of the potential biases in there, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. And also, preprints as a reader can enable you to stay on top of trends and emerging research. Finally, here are some advantages of preprints that might be a little bit outside of the box. So items that aren't usually publishable can be shared via a preprint server. Maybe it's data, maybe it's code, maybe it's appendices that you wouldn't be able to put in a traditional journal article. Those can be included with preprints. Preprints can also be cited in grants, tenure, dossiers, or job applications. It's an easy way to make sure the people who are reviewing your grants, job application, your tenure packet, know about your research and kind of can see it more visibly. It also can lead to new collaborators. People might read your work who wouldn't have otherwise. Those people might be people you want to collaborate with. So it can kind of build this community easier and quicker. Preprints aren't without problems or aren't without questions. Here are some of the questions that come up with preprints. Are preprints lower quality because they're not peer reviewed? Because there's not that vetting process, does scholarship become more cluttered? Preprints may also not be as valued on grants, tenure dossiers, job application as published work. We mentioned the benefit of preprints and staking your claim, but the question that may rise is, would it be worth more to be the first person published on a topic versus the first person to kind of speak and articulate that topic? In the same vein, will a preprint help your competitors who are researching the same field as you? And the final question that preprints raise, are your colleagues actually reading preprints? or would it be preferred that you're publishing in high esteemed journals? I think I mentioned earlier that these questions, they're valid questions, but preprints don't have to live outside the traditional publishing model. So thinking about pursuing those in tandem might be a way to get past some of these questions. The theme of open access this week, this year globally, is to build open knowledge and structural equity. So I want to address how preprints help us do this. I mentioned already that open scholarship is going to allow researchers from institutions with less restrictions, less money, access to your scholarship. It makes a big difference in the way that peers across the world can access and participate in research and scholarship. Timeliness. Problems can delay publications. Hiccups happen. Things come up in the review process that aren't always about the content. And that can make it really difficult for new scientists who are building their reputation and trying to get started in their career. So by having this avenue of preprints, it lets those folks become more timely and share their research quicker and more visibly. Another point I want to be sure to share is that there's not as many BIPOC or women reviewers, which could lead potentially to some bias in the peer review process for journals. By sharing work in places without the gatekeeper of peer reviewers, we could potentially eliminate or at least reduce some of this bias. And I will say some of the ideas from this slide come from a talk unpacking the role of preprints and peer review, and I shared a link there. It's a really nice talk if you want to check it out. So I've shared a little bit about preprints. I've raised some of the issues, but if you want to hear from researchers who are actually engaged in preprints, I really recommend our panel on Wednesday. Will be from 4 to 5 tomorrow, from 4 to 5. And we're going to be talking with four scientists who have been using preprints, all from different disciplines, and Mariana Garcia, who you'll hear from later, will be facilitating that. This is you can view it live in Carlson 103. We also have a Zoom link. It's actually the same Zoom link as this meeting. So I encourage you to attend that if you want to hear more from people who have actually been engaged with preprints on the ground. So we're going to transition now to talking about some of the discipline-specific servers. We're going to talk about Humanities Commons, SSRN, OSF, bioRxiv, ChemArchive, arXiv, and medArchive. So I'm going to conclude my presentation now. You'll hear from me at the end, but turn it over to my colleagues to share their expertise about these preprint servers.
All right, one moment while I queue up our next bit. Sorry, I was looking at the recording pause, but I know Mariana's taking care of that. Thank you, Sarah. You are super helpful. Or no, that's not it. Here it is. Thank you. All right. First up, we have Humanities Commons.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Lara Nicosia, and I'm one of the humanities librarians here at River Campus Libraries. And I wanted to tell you briefly about Humanities Commons. Humanities Commons officially launched in 2016, so it's been around for about 5 years now, following the success of another project, MLA Commons, from the Modern Language Association. One of the notable things about Humanities Commons is that it was supported by a grant from the Mellon Foundation as a way to bring together different disciplinary organizations on a single platform. So there are other preprint servers that exist in the humanities. You have things like Phil Papers, which is phenomenal for philosophy, but this was really about bringing together all the different disciplines in the humanities in one place to support interdisciplinary communication and collaboration. Currently, it's supported financially and through hosting by Michigan State University. And that's notable because it really is a nonprofit, open access, open source network that was designed in part as an alternative to some of the commercial options that you see out there, like ResearchGate and academia.edu. This is run by not-for-profit societies specifically. So if you're not familiar with Humanities Commons, it's more than just a preprint server. It's really meant to be a place to kind of bring scholars together. It's part social network, it's part institutional repository, it's web hosting. It's really about collaboration between the disciplines. And their preprint or postprint server is really known as CORE, the Commons Open Repository Exchange. And CORE accepts all sorts of different types of materials. As Sarah had mentioned in her presentation, one of the nice things about these preprint servers is you're not limited to necessarily one specific type of source often. And recognizing differences in disciplines amongst the humanities, Humanities Commons welcomes books and book chapters, journal articles, but also music, performances, visual art, translations, code, all sorts of different types of source types can be submitted to the repository. Anything that's uploaded to Humanities Commons receives a DOI. And one of the nice things about this kind of network that it belongs to, with all of these discussion groups and things like that that scholars can belong to, is as part of the upload process, you have the opportunity to share it immediately with relevant groups. So it's really about not only making your content available, but also kind of broadcasting it and sharing it in an interdisciplinary forum. Anything that's added to Humanities Commons, you retain the rights to that material, but there is an option to assign it a Creative Commons license if you would like. So particularly for images and photographs and things along those lines, that often gets used so that people can kind of build upon the work that you've done. For scholars who want to use and interact with your work, there's no registration required to use the site. They're big about protecting the privacy of its users as well, so people can search and download the content without having to necessarily disclose who they are. So that's one of the other benefits. And in March of 2020, one of the grad assistants who supports the Humanities Commons had shared at a conference that currently the site has about 20,000 members with work submitted in 20 or more languages and sees about nearly 30,000 monthly visitors from over 100 countries. So it really does have a nice platform that it's building, and it's only growing and continuing to grow. So it's a really nice, like I said, interdisciplinary option for humanities scholars who are interested in disseminating their work outside of traditional journal and book models.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bob Berkman. I am the business librarian here at U of R, Rush-Reese. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about SSRN, another spot where you can find preprints. So it used to be called, when it was founded not too long ago, called Social Science Research Network, and now they could just go by the acronym. And it's got over 950,000 papers. And it's pretty broadly, it's pretty broad coverage. So it does cover 65 different disciplines. So papers come from the applied sciences, they come from the health sciences, they come from humanities, they come from life sciences, from physical sciences, and it does include social sciences. You know, you'll find often that these preprints and collections repositories kind of lean a bit towards the hard sciences, but SSRN does include social sciences, and that also includes business as well. And just some other little bit of data. It includes papers by over 500,000 authors right now. And in the last month, 74,000 authors have added their papers to SSRN. The other thing about SSRN that makes it a little bit different is that it's quite broad in its coverage, not only in academic disciplines, but will also include what is called gray literature, which is sometimes just the type of information you might not easily find from a database. That could be hard to find conference papers, for example, or government documents. It includes book reviews, multimedia, and data sets. So it's pretty broad types of documents you can find as well. And another way that SSRN kind of stretches the boundaries of a traditional preprint server is that actually does include some access to items that are in copyright and are fee-based. So although it's really designed as the preprint, not yet in copyright type of server, it does have a special section where you can also choose to include the more traditional in copyright previously published, and those are documents you would either have to have permission or pay to download. What's nice about SSRN too is that you can, to find the documents that you want, you can either do some standard browsing. So pick a larger discipline, starting with applied sciences, and then go down a hierarchy, and finally filter and create a list just within the subdiscipline you want. You can also do a search of the entire collection. And SSRN does have a nice advanced search function where you can do a little more precise searching. You can, for example, say you only want to search for your words in the title, or title plus abstract, or title plus the abstract and keywords, indexed words that the librarian or indexer has used to describe the particular paper. You can also limit it by author and by date. So that's really nice for doing precision searching. Probably one of the most unique things about SSRN is it really focuses a lot on metrics. It likes a lot of numbers and as a way to provide its own sort of way of ranking authors and papers. So when you find a paper, you can discover how many times has it been downloaded. So for example, in total, there's been 154 million papers downloaded from SSRN. But if you're looking within a certain field and you want to know which paper was downloaded the most, SSRN will tell you. It'll also tell you page views. So it's one of those, it's called alt metrics sometimes. Other ways, debatable sometimes as to how much this really means. But if you just want to take it at its face value and just wondering how often something's been downloaded or looked at, you can use SSRN for that. And it will also, as part of this, do lists like what's the top, what is the papers that have been downloaded the most within this particular subdiscipline or category. So it's interesting, it's interesting to look at and see what papers are making the rounds or being passed around, looked at and shared and downloaded. So SSRN makes it very simple to do that. Another interesting thing about SSRN is it's right here in Rochester, New York. It was founded here, I think maybe about 20 years ago, but I'm not exactly sure, but not that long ago, really. And then in 2016, the giant academic publisher that many of you I'm sure have heard of, the Dutch publisher Elsevier, which is controversial in the library and academic world because its journals are so expensive. And there's a whole system there, which we may get into later in this week about the whole scholarly publishing industry and why there's some problems for librarians, scholars, and authors. But it is now part of Elsevier. So far, it doesn't seem to have changed SSRN too much. I've seen a few other areas where I think adding the copyright was one change, and also asking people to sign in to get a few extra features. But so far, it doesn't seem to have changed the basic way it works or its mission. So that's good news. And that is SSRN, which is just at ssrn.com.
All right, next up we have just plain arXiv. arXiv is, as it self-describes, a curated research sharing platform, that empowers people around the world to read and contribute cutting-edge work quickly in an open access environment. It is the original preprint server. It encompasses currently a variety of scientific disciplines. Currently, it's physics, mathematics, computer science, quantitative biology, quantitative finance, statistics, electrical engineering and system science, and economics. Those are always subject to change, always expanding to some more things, but definitely more of a scientific-based preprint server. This has been around for a long time, 30 years in fact. founded in 1991, but is currently maintained and operated by Cornell University because it has become so large that it is not possible for one person to maintain it anymore. It is so large, it has about just shy of 2 million scholarly articles there at last count. It is very in-depth. It's got some really great support for specific archive author identifiers, but it also has some great support for ORCID. So those of you with an ORCID or profile there, it has built-in great support for that. One other reason that it has so many great features is that it has some really amazing financial support from different member institutions, foundations, affiliates, and sponsors around the world. I am not sure how many there are. There's a very, very long list, but University of Rochester is one of them. So it is definitely a pet project for us because we are one of the folks who support it. If you have any other questions about that, please email me and let me know. Next up, we have OSF.
Right. So, hi everyone. I'm Sarah Siddiqui. I'm a STEM librarian here at Carlson Library, and I'm talking about the Open Science Framework Preprints. So this one is kind of interesting and a little different from the others in that this is a preprint server, but it's also an aggregator. So OSF, it is maintained by the Center of Open Science, which is a not-for-profit entity. So that improves, that helps, makes us feel better about it. Like I said, so it has preprints which are hosted on OSF by users, but it also aggregates from other servers such as arXiv, bioRxiv, PeerJ, ChemArchive, there's arXiv. So it's very interdisciplinary, and all of this is done by the SHARE agreement. SHARE is a consortium which was initiated by the Association of Research Libraries, but is also supported by the American Association of Universities, other collaborators, and that allows them to find things over here which are beyond OSF. So as of this morning, there are over 2.3 million searchable preprints in OSF. So it's highly interdisciplinary, and users who are uploading their versions of preprint in OSF itself have the option to update what they're adding in. And people can look at the latest versions of their preprints. So the authors as well as the public have access to the most current version as well as the previous versions, depending on how you want to have your sharing agreement or how you want to share it. So preprints have persistent URLs and DOIs, which makes it easy to cite them. Also within the OSF platform, you can add your preprints and your documents, but you can also link to any code or software that you've been using. So as Sarah had talked about in her presentation, it's a really nice way of looking at all the different things, stuff that you can publish, but also other supplemental materials. And that makes it a really good platform. And just to make it more searchable, authors also have the option to add tags to their content. So suppose you're doing something that doesn't necessarily mention sustainability in the title, but it has a sustainability element to it, you can add that tag and people can find it through that. Also, as I mentioned, the supporting data and code can be shared alongside the manuscript. And one great thing about OSF preprints is that the content in there is indexed by Google Scholar, so people can find preprints that are in there too. Also, when it comes to licenses, users are not required to add a license to the preprint, but they can do so if they want. And they encourage open and non-restrictive options. So yeah, that's OSF preprints, and you'll hear more about preprint aggregators later on. Next up.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mariana Garcia. I am one of the STEM and scholarly communications librarians. I'm going to talk a little bit about bioRxiv, the preprint for server for biology or life sciences. And online articles, bioRxiv is an online archive and distribution service for unpublished preprints in the life science. So that is very important. BioArchive only accepts unpublished preprints. It is maintained by Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, but it has had later support by the Chan Zuckerberg initiative. Articles in BioArchive are screened for offensive and non-scientific content and for material that actually might pose a health or biosecurity risks. Because it deals with life science, they have that extra security screening. And they are also checked for plagiarism. Articles may be posted, as I mentioned, prior to or concurrently with submission to a journal, but should not be posted if already accepted. So it's not a place to put post prints or accepted manuscripts, only preprints, non-peer-reviewed manuscripts. Authors are free to submit revised versions of an article at any time prior to formal acceptance by a journal. So you can have several versions of the same article. One good feature is that readers might add public comments to the articles, so they can start doing post peer review process on the preprints on the platform. Links, when your preprint is published, BioArchive automatically add a link to the published version. So people can navigate very easily from the preprint to the published version. Also, another good feature is that BioArchive provides text and data mining of all the articles. So people can actually do a lot of different searches using their API. Finally, it works with a series of journal partners. So actually, people can direct transfer their preprint to the journal for peer review. So you submit once to BioArchive, and within archive, you transfer to the journal where you want to submit if it is a journal partner. And it has a lot of preprints, perhaps not so much as some of the others, but currently today it had 138,027 preprints. And if you have any questions, please contact me. Thank you.
Hi, my friends. I'm Sue Cardinal. I'm the Chemistry and Chemical Engineering Librarian here at the University of Rochester. And I want to tell you about ChemArchive. So this preprint server started in 2017, so it's relatively new. And it's for chemists and chemical engineers who are ready to share their research quickly, cheaply, easily, and openly, right? So it's free. There's a smaller number of articles compared to others. 10,000 is how many they just reached. And some of the success is due to the sponsorship of the chemical societies, including the American Chemical Society, the Chinese Chemical Society, the Royal Society of Chemistry, the Chemical Society of Japan, and Gesellschaft Deutscher Chemiker. So once posted, an article can easily be submitted to a society journal of choice using direct journal transfer. In most ACS journals, even the Journal of the American Chemical Society was, kind of a reluctant contributor at first. They permit preprint posting. And you can always check the ACS prior publication policies for more information about the journals. So spurred on by COVID-19, post-preprint servers escalated last year, as you can imagine. So there were 3,847 articles posted in ChemArchive just in 2020. So it's growing significantly. All preprints posted to the server are checked for plagiarism, offensive, dangerous, as you can imagine in chemistry, and or non-scientific content. However, only unpublished, not peer-reviewed manuscripts can be deposited. So it's preprints, not published. Researchers can share the DOIs of their recent preprints with colleagues, potential employers, and the research community in general through social media and on job applications, grant applications. Although not formally peer-reviewed or expertly formatted, preprints can establish priority, as Sarah Pugachev mentioned, for credit on scientific discoveries and increase the speed for scientific advancement. So in addition, community discussions addressing specific preprints can help authors improve their papers. So ChemArchive tracks public interest using altmetric, including coverage in the news, blogs, social media of its preprints. So thanks for listening. If you have any questions, I'm Sue Cardinal at the University of Rochester.
All right, good morning. My name is Daniel Castillo. I'm the head of scholarly communications and research initiatives over in the Medical Center's minor libraries. Here on the Medical Center side, the 3 preprint servers you're most likely to encounter are the last 2 we just discussed in medRxiv. What differentiates medRxiv from bioRxiv and ChemArchive is its focus on human health research. You can see a full list of subject areas covered by medRxiv on the right-hand side of this slide. There are a few important limitations to consider when submitting a manuscript to medRxiv. medRxiv does not accept all articles, so if you have a case report, we may have to consider other options. One of the most important limitations when you're considering submitting to medRxiv is when you do so. Similar to bioRxiv, it has to be done prior to the article being accepted. So if you're interested in using our For Your Research service where we can help you explore if a paper is eligible to be shared openly, we may have to explore other options if the paper has already been published. Moriana and I will be offering open office hours for Your Research following this event and again on Thursday morning. There are some nice advantages for researchers using medRxiv. In addition to the traditional benefits of expediting research dissemination and fostering communication accessibility, medRxiv offers a direct transfer service where they will help facilitate the journal submission process for several journals, including many titles from BMJ and PLOS. Since last year, medRxiv is indexed on PubMed and can be searched using Google Scholar. I actually just ran a search last week and was able to find an article about wastewater surveillance to track COVID-19 co-authored by Dr. Katrina Korfmacher here at the Medical Center. According to Altmetric, this paper was in the top quarter of all their scored research outputs and was cited in the bulletin of the World Health Organization. So this is just a nice example of seeing how preprints can help sort of increase that research dissemination. One last benefit I do want to mention, and this is whether we're looking at medRxiv or any of the other preprint servers already discussed today, is that it's important to remember that the NIH encourages including preprints on your grant applications. So just remember, using preprints is just another great way to demonstrate your scholarly impact when it comes time to apply for a grant. All right, thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you to all my colleagues. And in just a moment, we're just going to throw it back to Sarah Pugachev to talk a little bit more about stuff. Just give me a second. Let me find my controls over here. And here we go. Back to you, Sarah.
Once again, thank you to my colleagues for the excellent information about those discipline-specific preprint servers. I'm going to be wrapping this up today, talking a little bit about tips to find preprints beyond the discipline-specific servers and how we at the library are able to help you. So, beyond the servers, Google Scholar is a great source for finding preprints. Unpaywall, which is an extension you add to your browser to find openly available versions of articles that are behind a paywall, is another great resource because that often leads to preprints. And then we have a number of services which we'll call preprint aggregators. So preprint aggregators pull together preprints from different servers. Here are a few that I might recommend you look into. The first is Dimensions. This is a database that we subscribe to at University of Rochester. And it includes arXiv, SSRN, bioRxiv, ChemArchive, medRxive, PeerJ preprints, and more. Unfortunately, they don't publish an exact list of all the preprints they include, but I do know that they're working on expanding this list. So it's not a bad place to start, especially if you're interested in science preprints. OSF, or Open Science Framework, Sarah Siddiqui already told you a lot about, but I want to point out again that this is also an aggregator. So it includes preprints hosted on OSF. They have a variety of subject-specific preprint servers and elsewhere. So it's a really nice place to start. And those include things that are social science and humanities disciplines as well. So that might give you a broader scope than something like dimensions. SciLit is a science-focused service. It includes preprints and articles. The way things are added to this site in their database is through Crossref. Crossref is the organization that issues DOIs, which most preprint servers also issue DOIs for their publications. So it ends up including a lot of preprints. Finally, there is another site called preprints.org. It's not a bad preprint aggregator, but all the sources within preprints.org are already covered by Open Science Framework's aggregator, plus Open Science Framework has some additional preprint servers included. So I'd really recommend starting with Open Science Framework over preprints.org. So how are we willing to help at the library? First, we want to help you use and cite preprints you may encounter. So here's an example of the American Chemical Society style of citing a preprint. Beyond that, we also want to help you if you want to publish a preprint. We can talk about what might be a good server to deposit your work. We are also run a service, River Campus Libraries, in connection with Minor Libraries, Daniel's Library, where we can help you understand publishing agreements you've already signed. We call this service Free Your Paper. So if you bring a paper to us you would like to make openly available, a lot of times the way to do that is via preprints, even if it's already published. Some publishers will let you go back and retroactively add the preprint. So we're actually running a version of this service right after this session. So if you have a paper you'd like to free, stick around and we're happy to talk you through what we can offer in this service. Finally, please get in touch if you have questions about anything that we talked about or preprints in general, or open access in general. So I've listed the name of all our presenters and what we talked about today. Please do get in touch if you have any questions. And actually, I'll pause now and in this recording and open up for the room to ask questions of my colleagues who are there.
All right. Thank you for sticking around with us. Hope you learned a little something new. Does anyone have any questions or anything regarding what was covered, or if you have any new questions of something we did not cover? We are all available for any sort of answer.
If nobody else has a question, I had one about liability, I guess legal liability. Has there been any instances, say, we talked about plagiarism being protected, but have there been instances of somebody taking now preprint information and profiting from that somehow or other, publishing an article? I'm sure there's like legal liability for all these source groups. So I just wondered whether that was an issue or a concern.
Excellent question. I'm going to turn that over to Mariana.
Hi everybody. Preprint servers offer a variety of licensing distributions. So many preprint servers allow you to share your preprint, but completely covered by copyright. So it's open to read, but not necessarily it's open to be used unless you choose so. So the preprint servers offer you complete copyright protection. You, of course, your preprint will be open to read, but you have legal resources if someone actually takes the content without your permission. Some preprints, some journals actually doesn't allow for news related to preprints to publish those. So basically, if a journalist wants to use your content, they need to ask permission to the author before publicizing the content. So those journals wants to be the first, in a sense, to announce in news and in public communications about the preprints. So authors have the choice to not allow journalists to use their content for news. Of course, as I said, most preprints servers now offer a variety of options, and depending on your content, you might choose to open your preprint from the very beginning to reuse or modifications or sharing, distribution, etc. Or you just keep the entire copyright and everybody needs to request permission from the author to reuse the content. I hope that that answered your question, David.
Yes, the idea I understand is the idea is just sharing and collaborating in order to advance research and not be concerned about your own benefits. So, I mean, if you're willing to do that with preprints, I mean, generally speaking, I would think your biggest desire is just that it gets out there and gets seen, and so it does make sense though. But yeah, it sounds like you have options too, which is
yes. Yeah. So the most conservative option is to keep full copyright over the preprint. So you just give the server, the preprint server, an exclusive license to share your content, but all other uses needs to be authorized by you as the author.
I do know some researchers here on the medical center side too that might be concerned about being scooped, especially things like systematic reviews. Will advise younger faculty to basically submit the preprint at the same time they're submitting the journal. That way they can have sort of that green open access option, make sure that their paper is freely available, but it reduces the chance that, you know, someone might see your work 6 months before you're ready to print.
right. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello. So one of the things that has been discussed in some articles is the quality of preprints, especially during COVID, as journalists start picking up the articles and sharing freely. You know, this is non-peer-reviewed science, and so there's concerns about the accuracy. The nice thing about preprints, as you've heard, is that there's like informal community review going on. And so actually, I think people get like a closer view to science, like what is right, what is wrong, what are people saying about things. But it might be happening through social media. And so it can be a little confusing sometimes when someone makes a statement in a preprint and then it's the community says, no, that's not right. And there have been papers that have been retracted.
Thank you for those excellent points, folks. Let's see, I see Lara wrote something into chat after the question of what's a good archive for library science. So Humanities Commons with the link in chat, please check that out. Any other questions we have? I will remind you that if you'd like to stick around for your paper session, that'll be happening immediately after we finish here. We are in Carlson 103, but I believe we are also going to be on Zoom, correct, Ryan? Yeah. So feel free to stick around in this room.
And if anyone is in medical center, they can stop towards minor library as well for that service.
Good call. And this is available year round. If you just contact your librarian, we're featuring it right now.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, we'll transfer this over for your paper if anyone is interested. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
I will not, don't worry. I'll make you the host right now.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you.